Hi, this is Dr. David Kirshner, and this is an introduction to using the ultrasound machine in the Children's Emergency Department. This video will go over turning the machine on, creating an exam, selecting a transducer and exam presets, optimizing image generation, saving images and video clips, adding and deleting text, measuring on screen, closing an exam, and reviewing an exam. This video will not review how to perform certain ultrasound scans, nor if the exam being performed is even the right scan to perform in the first place. This is our machine, which is made up of 3 components on a cart. The bottom component is the actual ultrasound machine with all its working parts and wizardry. The second component is the keyboard, as well as a number of other buttons that help in image generation and storage. And finally, the screen. The only really important part of the bottom component is the power button. Press once to turn on, press once to turn off, and press repeatedly to see me freak out. Creating an exam. While it is possible to generate images without creating an exam, this is a key part of the patient encounter. Think of it like the chart documentation for the ultrasound exam you are performing. This is also the way that, as you are learning, you can record your images to be reviewed from an educational and quality control point of view. If and when you get to the point where you are making clinical decisions based on your exams and asking others to act based on those same exams, it is crucial to have documentation to support your decisions. The first step is to find the new patient key on the keyboard. By tapping this button, this screen will show up. This is where you will input patient data. For the time being, you need to fill in the patient's first and last name, their gender, your initials as the operator and referring physician, and a brief comment in the comment section. Eventually, we will be moving to a 2-patient identifier system, and it will be necessary to input the patient's birth date as well. Whether this is done in the date of birth section or manually inputted in the comment section, it will be the second patient identifier. The comment section is your opportunity to indicate why you are performing the scan. It helps focus others who review the scan as to what your clinical question was in performing the scan. Were you concerned for a rectus sheath hematoma or appendicitis when you did an abdominal scan of the right lower quadrant? To move your cursor around the screen, you can use the trackball and the set buttons to either side of the trackball, as they work like the buttons on a mouse. Now, before you hit the Exit tab at the bottom left of the screen, there is one other thing to do. You need to take a picture of this screen. To take a screenshot, simply touch the Still button once. You will hear an audible beep. And now, a unique ID will be inputted into the patient exam. This is a combination of the date and some random extra numbers. Okay, now you can click on the Exit button, which will take you back to this main screen. If you have inputted everything correctly, the patient's name should appear at the top left corner of the screen. The next step is to select the probe you want to use for the exam you will perform. Tap the Transducer button at the upper right side of the control panel. The small screen is located in this location will change from whatever it says to this. These represent the 3 probes that we have attached to the machine. Depending on the exam you are doing, you can select a probe by tapping the button underneath it. The C9 to 3 probe is the general probe used for assessing lungs, the abdomen, heart, and any deeper structures. The linear or hockey stick probe is used for imaging superficial structures. It has better resolution than the C9 to 3 probe, but can't penetrate as deeply into the tissue. Finally, the C10 to 3 probe. This is best used for neonatal and very young children. It can be used for cardiac and lung exams, as well as transcranial ultrasound, which is way beyond what we will be learning about today. The next step is to tap the exam type button, also located in the right upper part of the control panel. The ultrasound machine has preset some of the values in wizardry to optimize images based on which parts of the body will be imaged. For example, if it is a larger patient that you will be doing a fast exam on, select Fast Diff as opposed to Fast or C Diff. That was my attempt at a joke. Anyway, by choosing Fast Diff, the frequency of the sound waves sent out from the probe will be reduced so as to penetrate to greater depths without losing as much energy. All right, we will briefly go over 4 other buttons that can help optimize the image you are generating so you can get the most clinical information from it. The 4 buttons are as follows. Gain, which changes how the sound returning to the probe is amplified. Depth, which changes how deep you will interrogate the tissue. Optimize will help with overall gain based on what is on the screen. And zoom, which focuses on a small area but will not make it any clearer. It's best to tap the Optimize button to begin once you have the area of interest in your field of interrogation. Now, we went over how to save an image, but need to add on how to save a clip as well. There are really 2 ways to save an image. First, if the anatomy you're trying to image has little or no movement associated with it, you can tap the Still button as you are scanning in real time. This doesn't always work so well, especially when imaging small structures, when there is a lot of movement, or when you will have to make measurements of a structure. The second option is to tap the Freeze button, which will freeze the screen. You can then use the trackball to look back on what the machine has just imaged, stop at the one you want, and then tap the Still button to save that image. After every image is saved, there will be an audible beep. To save a clip, just hit the Clip button. You will see a small bar that fills in the bottom right corner of the screen. As long as that bar is filling, a clip is being saved. The machine is currently set to save a 6-second clip and will make an audible beep once the clip storage is complete. Can't recall if you took an image of the gallbladder with the measurements you meant to? You can review the exam in progress by tapping the Current Exam button. This will bring up all the images and videos that you have saved thus far. To exit this review screen, tap the Current Exam button again. Adding and deleting text. If you look at the bottom left corner of the keyboard, the keys that we need to add and delete text can be found. To add text, tap the Text button. A cursor will be visible on the screen. The cursor can be moved to any part of the screen with the trackball. You can type anything you want using the keyboard as you would for typing on any document. There are also some shortcut keys, but we won't get into those now. After typing on the screen, be sure to tap the Still button to save your comments. To delete text, tap the Delete Text Word button. This will delete what you have written one word at a time. It is important to input comments when you have the exam open, as you can't go back and add comments to the exam once it is closed. How to measure a length. Step 1, tap the Freeze button. Step 2, tap the Measure button. This will place one set of crosshairs on the screen that you can move around with the trackball. There will be a number in centimeters in the lower right side of the screen. This is showing you how far the set of crosshairs is from the probe surface. Step 3, tap the Set button. This will create a second set of crosshairs joined to the first set by a dashed line. The machine will now measure the distance between the two sets of crosshairs. You can toggle between the two sets of crosshairs by tapping the Set button again. This is what the screen will look like with the crosshairs, the dashed line in between, and the distance shown in centimeters. To save an image of this, simply tap the Still button. So now you've collected all the images and videos you required for this patient encounter. The next step is to close off the exam with your impression and findings. Remember how on the initial patient data screen you put in a comment about why you were doing the exam? Now is when you put in a comment about what you thought of your exam. To do this, you will need to tap the Freeze button, tap the Text button so that you have a cursor on the screen, type in your findings and impression. Feel free to take up multiple lines for this. Type the letters EPO as your last line, and finally tap the Still button to save an image of this in the patient exam. This is what it will look like. Now, why put the letters EPO at the end? They stand for Educational Purposes Only. This is to protect us and our patients. With this, we are stating that while the scan was performed, it is only for educational purposes and it is not meant to replace a consultative ultrasound scan. This is a good time to remind the patient and family that this was for educational purposes only, and that if a consultative exam is deemed necessary, you will arrange for it to occur. Well, we are there finally, closing an exam. Tap the End Exam key at the top of the keyboard, and a pop-up box will appear that says something to the effect of, "Are you sure you want to close this exam?" If you do indeed want to close the exam, use the trackball to select Yes, otherwise select No. If you select Yes to close an exam, you will notice closed as the patient name will disappear from the top left corner of the screen. Let's say you want to go back and review an exam that you or someone else performed that has been completed. Tap the Archive key at the top of the keyboard, and this screen will appear. Under where it says patient's name, there will be a list of patient names, the names that have been inputted when a bedside scan is performed. From here, it is possible to highlight a study with the trackball and Set button and open it for review. It is also possible to export it to a USB stick. If it is exported, you must click on the option to remove all patient identifiers from the images, and the machine will do it for you. To exit the archive list, simply tap Archive again. So that, in a nutshell, is how to use our ultrasound machine. Please feel free to review at your leisure and pipe up with any questions that you have as you learn to maneuver around its functions.